suppose that you're writing a really important email to a colleague.
That's okay, just switch it off. I switched off the sound here, so that's fine. Is to take you through some of the scenarios which are possible, both the hopeful future scenarios and ones which are less so. And you're also going to be getting a visceral lived sense of that, with the intention to start to say, okay, and what is then ours to do? What is mine to do in order to help move the world towards a scenario that I would like to live in? The one I'm going to take you through, also from my background as a geneticist, is a most recently published book by Christian Kermel called Humanification, Go Digital, Stay Human. And basically what he says is, look to nature to understand how 10 trillion cells of our body communicate and form social coherent and efficient communities. Together we all have the power to learn from nature, to create things of beauty, a life of purpose, and we all have the power to change our world. And he actually has, a little bit like Frédéric Laloux, if you know Laloux's book, has looked back over nature's map and mapped it against waves and technology evolution, and he comes up with this incredibly hopeful message. Rachel, are you okay to?
I'm a math person. You just have to tell me.
No, I'll tell you 1 second. The other thing about it that he's always talking about is you're talking about S-curves. So where S-curves are where at the beginning when things are starting to change, you don't see it, you don't notice it. But there's still an awful lot happening. But it's when it sort of takes hold, then you get this acceleration phase, yeah? So what he's looking at is looking back at nature's map and noticing these S-curves as things happen in evolution and mapping that against the technological evolution. Exactly, yeah. So just like living cells, humans started in small communities. And he's mapping that with the prokaryotic cell, which is basically the bacterial cell. I don't know if anybody knows about it, where the DNA is just in the cell. It's the simplest form, more or less the simplest form of life. The next jump was as we grow in numbers, we become more like social beings. And there you're moving to the prokaryotic cells starting to move together. The next one is our improved communication skills and able us to share ideas and food. So again, you're getting this jump. And here we're starting to move into the eukaryotic cell. In the eukaryotic cell, you've got the DNA in the center of the cell. So you're getting more complex forms, which enable more complex interaction with the environment. Next slide. As a result, our communities grow bigger and more complex. We get more complex multicellular life forms. And next, we start to develop advanced energy infrastructures, and he's mapping that with the development of our vascular system. So he's continuously mapping between what's happening in a biological evolution with what is actually happening with us. The next is we developed an advanced and global telecom infrastructure, and the map is the nervous system, and I find it fascinating how the pictures look very similar. It's really, really fascinating, I find. So how you can look at something at a big, huge scale and look at a smaller scale and find the same thing. The next one is we started to connect and automate many ICT processes, and then you have the beginning of the reptilian brain. So in the reptilian brain, that's all of our breathing, all of the sort of things which are there for survival. Basically, this was in our brain, so we don't have to think about it. So we are now freed up. We don't have to, I mean, imagine if we actually had to think, oh my God, I have to breathe. So all of that is in there. And this is, again, with our ICT processes, that similar sort of a map. The next, people start to connect on a global scale via social media. And here we have the mammalian brain, this need to connect. And the next, deep neural networks in the cloud help our humanity to learn faster. And again, the neocortex brain, the most recent part of our brain. And then the final, I think, why he's doing, not just why he's doing this, but one of the things which I find is an extremely powerful message is this hopeful future scenario. To consider ourselves as standing, you were looking for this new story, and for me, this is the new story. It's a story I'm absolutely willing to work on at least, that we're standing on the evolutionary equivalent of what nature created when she gave organisms a neocortex. And we're poised at the edge of an explosion of creativity, a wave that heralds a creative revolution. Next. But there's also other options. And these are true now also. So there is a prediction of 5 million job losses in the next 20 years. A 2015 UK parliamentary research report estimates 35% of UK jobs at risk. Really interesting, Google purchases YouTube for 1.65 billion. It employs 65 people. Facebook purchases Instagram for 1 billion. It employed 13. This one I also find, Apple invests billions. So people around the world are dying to have Apple to come, yeah? Apple invests billions in a data center in Maiden, North Carolina, creating 55 jobs. Something else we were talking about this morning that we need to take care about, it is this assumption that robots, quote, artificial intelligence will take those jobs which can be automated, the jobs which don't require human intelligence, human creativity. That is no longer correct. Just as a short thing, in 2016, a robot writes a short novel, which I think is really interesting. The novel that it wrote was The Day a Computer Writes a Novel. It was shortlisted for a literary prize in Japan. People did not know that it was written by a robot. It was submitted by its programmers or whatever it is, and it nearly won. And IBM's Watson, I think as you already know, is better than the very best cancer oncologists, thank you, at being able to predict what is cancer and what is not. And there's a whole load of research being, so IBM's Watson demonstrated concordance rates of 96% for lung, 81% for colon. This is with a team of the absolute best oncologists in India. And in 2012, Kodak goes bankrupt. I think everybody knows the Kodak moment when they decided not to take the digital. It employed 17,000 people when it went bankrupt. In its heyday, it had a market capitalization of 28 billion and provided jobs for 140,000. This is also true. And I don't know if anybody knows the Homo Deus book.
Yes.
Harari had an interview 2 or 10 days ago in which he talked about the global useless population. So in other words, we're right now starting to create a large group of people who do not have a job, who do not have a livelihood. And I think the key question which was asked in the WEF forum was not about the job loss, but it is about what is the future of work, what is the nature of work, what is the distribution of wealth, so, next. Rachel, you.
So we sent this to you as a possible pre-reading, so I won't go into much detail, but you can look this up. It's freely available, but it's quite interesting as a take. This is PwC scenarios on the future of work, and it's quite a convincing set of scenarios where work would be completely different. I mean, jobs would look nothing like each other from one world to the other. In particular, what I find particularly interesting is that the red world, where it's anything goes in the race to create technological innovation, and that's all that counts. So that's the only thing that is appreciated, is your capacity to create technological innovation. And then on the other side, so individualism, collectivism on the other side, where you have a fragmented world, but it's very much more socially oriented. So you would have things like guilds, you would have more kind of ethics and this thing about the 200 kilometers where you do your sourcing and all of this kind of thing. It's you would have autonomous households, energy autonomous households and this kind of thing. You would source from within the region. So it's into a world of fragmentation, but also a world of, in principle, more well-being and more sustainable for humankind. And then on the bottom, the green world is much more a world of global corporate responsibility, people thinking in the broad sense about sustainability, about water, about whatever it is, with demographic changes. And then on the other side is more, it's kind of the extreme of what we know today, I would say, is corporate rules okay. And it's the hunting for talent and big company capitalism, where we favour this over social responsibility or sustainability of the environment. And it doesn't matter what we do to the world.
Did you use Trump on purpose?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we can see these kinds of tensions playing out already in the world today, and pockets of this, of course, all over the place. And just before we hand over to you, because we're going to get you to work on this, we tried to do our own draft set of scenarios. I mean, we've voluntarily we haven't populated them, or not very much, but we've just created a couple of dimensions and started to populate a few, and we would like to invite you to populate them. You may have an issue with our dimensions, but that's always the case with scenarios, but we thought these were quite useful. You're welcome to challenge them if you want to. So we have basically technology in the interests of humanity and nature, which is more the Christopher Commer scenarios, and then this is more, what's his name? Harari at the bottom, with robots rule, Brave New World, that kind of world. And then on the other axis, we've put ego, so similarly to the PwC scenarios, so it's more kind of fragmentation, individualization. And on the other side, it's eco, so it's much more to do with the sustainability of the world, working collectively to make this a better world, this kind of thing. What we would like invite you to do is to sort of divide roughly into 4 groups and see whether you can populate these a bit more. Yeah?
Each group corresponding to one
scenario. Yeah.
Do you want to
So
assign?
I suppose we could just sort of broadly divide the room up.
Can we skip Danish instead?
Could we put the Danish welfare?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, sorry. Just